to support them in participating fully in civic life, because their leadership is essential to our city's future. As we continue our work elevating the voices and priorities of women across New York, we are honored to be joined by two leaders helping shape policy and government action at the state level. Commissioner Denise Miranda serves as Commissioner of the New York State Department of Human Rights. She leads efforts to protect civil rights and advance equity for all New Yorkers. Commissioner Miranda is also on the board of WCC. Joining her is her Chief of Staff, Belkis Alonso-Ortiz, whose leadership helps drive the agency's strategic vision and impact across the state. In this webinar, we will discuss the state's agenda as it pertains to women, the challenges and opportunities facing New Yorkers today, and how policy can help create a more equitable future. You will have the opportunity to ask questions, so please add them to the chat. And now join me in welcoming Commissioner Miranda and Chief of Staff Alonso-Ortiz.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you, but we're together all the time. So with that, I think we could probably just jump right in.
Absolutely. Let's start this discussion. This time together is really to discuss some of the governor's recent budget passing. And, I think I want to start off just very simply with what do you think are some of the biggest wins for women and gender expansive New Yorkers in this budget?
So I think when we're talking about this budget, it's important to emphasize that all New Yorkers are winning in this budget, right? But when you're talking about the first female governor and the first mom governor, you know that there's going to be some real emphasis on individuals, but families also, right? And so families feature prominently in this budget. And we're talking about the buckets of priority. We're talking about safety, and we're talking about affordability.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about safety specifically. Okay. I think safety is a top concern for many New Yorkers. What specifically in this budget is doing to help make New Yorkers feel safer in their homes, in their communities, at work and at school?
So we know that there was a lot of concern during the pandemic years, right, when we saw that uptick in crime. And, I'm happy to share that under this governor's leadership, we're talking about the lowest numbers of gun violence. And that is in part due to a record investment of billions of dollars that she's made in gun prevention programs. Safety is always going to be a concern. I'm born and raised in New York, as you are.
As I am.
And we all know that every single day we talk about safety, and we talk about our daughters, and we talk about their life in the city. And so we're talking about subways, right? And making sure that subways are safer, right? And that's a significant investment that she's made. Also, when we're talking about safety, I think it's important that we also talk about discrimination, because keeping New Yorkers free from discrimination is inherently keeping them safe, right? So really thinking about safety in a more expansive way that goes beyond just violence. That said, I think I'd be remiss to, fail to emphasize, again, the reduction in crime, and a lot of that being attributable to the governor's investments.
Right. Many of us, and we've talked about this, have seen the chilling effect of ICE's presence has had on immigrant communities. Us at DHR, we are very cognizant of those situations. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the budget's effect on immigrant concerns or ICE concerns specifically.
So I think the governor has been, very clear, right? Explicitly clear with respect to how she feels about ICE. And I think there were a lot of promises that were made during the presidential elections about going after criminals. And what we have seen is that ICE efforts go way beyond criminals. We're talking about family members, hardworking individuals, our neighbors, our friends, right? Right before coming into this room, I was watching on the news that I believe Honan was speaking about increasing the ICE presence in New York. And a lot of that is in response to the protections that have been put in place by the governor, right? And when we're talking about those protections, what do they look like? We're talking about ensuring that ICE agents aren't wearing masks, that they can't hide their identity, right? Make sure that we're able to identify you. We're talking about keeping spaces safe. So we're talking about churches and hospitals and schools, right? ICE cannot enter without a judicial warrant. So making sure that that is part of the legislation. we're also talking about ensuring that ICE is not working with local government to have access to facilities, right, for detention. This governor has been very clear with respect to ICE and what we talk about and how we interpret cooperation. Unfortunately, with this federal administration, they take a much broader view, and we see how this is impacting even our work here at the division, right? 19 protected classes. Don't ask me for all of them. I haven't mastered that list yet. However,
we quiz each other
all the time. But we know that national origin, language, right, race, religion, all of those are protected classes. And so when we talk about the protections for immigration communities, I need to make sure that we're mentioning the investment that the governor has made here at the Division of Human Rights, right?
Of course.
Nearly doubling our budget so that we can enforce the human rights law, which protects immigrant communities. So, I'm very proud to work for this governor who has made it a commitment to ensuring that we're protecting communities, all New Yorkers. And I think all of this speaks volumes as to her priorities as a governor.
Yeah, we talk very often how we have 19 protected classes and everyone in New York is part of a protected class.
Absolutely.
Right? So let's talk a little bit about work-life balance, so to speak. Many women continue to balance work, caregiving, whether for children or, adult parents, and other family responsibilities. How does this budget help people in situations like that?
So when we're talking about women and work-life balance, as if we don't know anything about that, right? As parents, as daughters, as people who have significant responsibilities, right, and also professional careers. When we're talking about work-life balance, I think there are a couple of issues that we want to focus. We want to focus on obviously universal child care.
Yeah.
And I have very distinct memories
As
about
do I.
what childcare costs in New York, right? And so that investment in childcare is significant, and it's also going to allow people to really, women specifically, right, and caregivers to really have that balance and close some of those gaps, those economic gaps that exist when you're spending a significant amount of your money on childcare. There's been an investment of $500 million to launch New York City 2 Care program. That is significant. There is a commitment to make sure that pre-K is funded throughout the entire state, kicking off in 2028 and 2029. And of course, there are also billions of dollars in various childcare subsidies. So when we're talking about, work-life balance for women, oftentimes integral to that conversation is childcare. And I think this year's budget and the priorities and the investments she's made and continues to make, I think really speaks to prioritizing that for many of us.
Right. And we just talked also about how it doesn't just end at, young children, right? We're talking about school-age children as well. And
school-age children in education. We're talking about universal lunch.
Right.
I don't think it's called universal, but free lunch programs for all of New Yorkers. We're talking about $39 billion in school aid. We're talking about a lot of investments, right? And again, speaking as the state's first governor who's a mom, a lot of this really speaks to, I think, many of the struggles that we have as women when we're trying to balance work life and also the responsibilities of home.
For sure. We also know that there is a persistent gender wage gap across the nation, and that includes New York State, fortunately. What has the governor been doing to address this? And can you talk a little bit more about our role as DHR in this space?
So when we're talking about the age gap, for those of us who are listening and perhaps are not aware, we're talking about 81 cents on the dollar in terms of what men make. And if we're talking about for Black women, we're talking about 65 cents. And if we're talking about Latina women, we're talking about 58 cents on the dollar, right? So the wage gap is a priority for all of us who are in this space trying to promote equity. And certainly it's a priority for the governor. We talked about childcare support, right, which of course is important, but we're also talking about legislation with respect to transparency, right, in wages. This will ensure that employers are being fair and equitable when it comes to issues of wage and promotion. So requiring them to list those ranges can hopefully be a preventative tool when we're talking about the wage gap. We're also talking about minimum wage, right, which has been raised and I believe in this next following year, it's going to be tied to inflation, which is a
Right.
first for New York State. And when we're talking about women and wage gaps, I would be remiss if we're not talking about the fact that the minimum wage impact is significant for women of color, right? Who are often doing these jobs. And so, again, all of these efforts, I think, really speak to the governor's priorities of ensuring that we're doing everything we can to close that wage gap. And of course, last but not least, I have to talk about what we're doing
Right.
with respect to the wage gap. So, here at the division, we investigate cases of discrimination. There are 19 protected classes. We see employment cases as our biggest bucket of cases, right, with respect to discrimination. The message here and the mandate here is to make sure that we're enforcing the human rights law. And the human rights law is here to prevent discrimination. And so we are the resource for all New Yorkers, to file a discrimination case if you believe that you have been discriminated. And that includes gender expression, right, and identity, and a host of the 17 or 18 other classes that we spoke about. And so what we will do here is investigate those claims. So it's important for New Yorkers and for women to understand that if you believe that you are being discriminated against, whether it's the pay that you're receiving or the promotions or sexual harassment, that the division is here to help you, right? And you can come here and you can report a claim. We have our website, dhr.newyork.gov. There's also a phone number that you can call if you'd like live support, and you can find all this information online. But you can come to us as a resource. And if there is sufficient information here that falls under our jurisdiction, as you know, we will investigate those claims, right? And we see a lot of gender-based discrimination in the employment context. And we're able to actually adjudicate those claims, reach settlements on those cases, compensate people for the discrimination that they've endured. So I think it's a combination of the governor's priorities, right? But also coupled with the work that we do that bolsters those priorities.
Right, the tools that are available for folks. So let's move on to maternal health and reproductive health. And, I know that you and I have talked about this a lot. What does this budget mean for maternal health and reproductive health at a time when access across the country is, under pressure?
So reproductive health and maternal health is something I think that, is very important to women across the state. We're talking about a federal administration that decided that they were going to cut Medicaid access. They were going to cut access to Planned Parenthood for Medicaid recipients, right? And when we think about the breadth and the scope of services that are available to women through Planned Parenthood, you're talking about significant impact. And you're talking about significant impact to women of various socioeconomic backgrounds, right? And so the governor was very clear that this was unacceptable. And she decided that she was going to fill that gap in to ensure that Medicaid recipients have access to quality care, and that's to the tune of $35 million. So again, speaks to her priorities. Some of the other things I want to highlight here would be $1.5 billion supporting federal budget cuts, making sure that we're restoring funds, $1.3 billion to strengthen safety net programs, safety net program hospitals. We're talking about hospitals that provide care and access to healthcare for all New Yorkers, irrespective of their ability to pay. And so that's particularly important, especially when we were talking about immigrant communities. And of course, here in the Bronx, where we're located and where we were born and raised, the Bronx received $8 million in a maternal health care unit here, right here, a couple of blocks away from our office. And that's important because when we talk about how economics really intersect with health, making sure that those resources and those investments are in the communities that need it most, I think is really essential to trying to close some of those health disparities that exist.
All right, let's move on a little bit. It's Pride Month. It's a really busy month here.
It's a very busy month
at DHR. I think the last count was 18 different Pride events that we all attend, and it's fantastic. It's one of my favorite months to be here at the division. But during Pride Month, what are we at the division, and I think folks would love to know what we at the division are doing to support gender expressive individuals and our LGBTQ population?
So Pride Month is 1 month, but at the division, right, we're promoting and
It's every month.
celebrating, enforcing our HRL 365 days a year.
Mhm.
But Pride Month is very busy, and there are a lot of festivities and a lot of different parades and gatherings throughout the state.
Mhm.
You know, what we realize is that we're very fortunate to be in New York City,
Yeah.
right? Which is certainly, you know, a very progressive place as compared to some other areas in the state.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that when there are pride events in different parts of the state, that we have representation there from our office, so that this presents an opportunity not just for celebration,
Right.
but also for education, right? And making sure that people know that the division is here and that gender expression and gender are protected categories. And so what are we doing? We are deploying all of our resources, I think, to 18 different events throughout the state. And we're there to make sure that we're providing education, to make sure that people understand their rights, and of course also celebrating, you know, side by side with our LGBTQIA plus community,
Right.
in the fact that New York is a state where you can love who you love, right? And I think that's something that is very important to all of us here, especially leadership at the division, promoting that message, walking the walk, talking the talk, and making sure, again, that we're enforcing the human rights law 365 days a year.
I mean, yeah, again, I can't help but say it again. It's one of my favorite months at the division, and I think it's one of the most impactful in terms of reaching communities that are outside of New York City. I think it just provides, you know, a fantastic way for folks to know that we're here to support all New Yorkers.
You know, just Friday, the governor had her reception to kick
Right.
off Pride Month up in Albany, and you know, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend and spoke with one of our regional council members. As you know, we have our hate and bias prevention unit.
Yeah.
10 regional councils throughout the state, made up of stakeholders, and one of the stakeholders was there, and they mentioned to me that our ability to support their events and show up, number one, speaks volumes to the commitment we have to the community. But also, she said this was the only time, lives in a rather conservative area of New York, this is the only time where people actually feel safe to go out and to celebrate,
Wow.
right? And so when you think about what that means for us as New Yorkers and what you think about what that means for the community, it's why we are at 18 different events, right? And it's why it is one of the busiest, albeit very fun, but one of the busiest months for us, because we know that there are areas of New York where the community doesn't feel supported, and we want to make sure that they know that we're here for them as much as we are here for, you know, all of our New York City neighbors.
Right, because you know, our resources when we go to these events, we're not just saying, hey, there's only, you know, this, we're here only for this protected class, but we, you know, we disseminate all of our information and information on all our protected classes. So it's really important, I think. All right, so one of the last questions, because I'm looking at our time, you know, what role can organizations like the WCC and individuals New Yorker play in getting involved with this kind of work and helping drive change in their own communities?
So WCC, I say this not just as a board member, but WCC is doing exactly what we want stakeholders to do, right? Is engaging in these conversations, ensuring that there's access to the information, and really amplifying the work of the division. You know, those partnerships are really essential.
Right.
It's amazing to me how many times I'm out engaging with the public and people don't realize that there's a human rights law, right? Or they think that their only recourse is through hiring a private attorney. No, you don't need a private attorney to file a report right here at the division. Or to also believe that, you know, the federal government, which really has curtailed, right, a lot of their access for a lot of communities through EEOC and some of the other programs, we're still here, right? The division is still in place. We're just as strong as we were prior to 2 years ago, and we will remain just as strong. So I think that having partners like WCC amplify that message and make sure that it is disseminated across the city is really important. So kudos to WCC for, you know, for the program.
Agreed. All right, well, I think it's time to move on to our Q&A, and Peyton over here has our first question. All right. So this is a good one. What are our current New York State priorities for serving older New Yorkers?
So older New Yorkers and the aging population in New York is a priority for us because we are seeing those numbers increase, right? And we're also seeing those numbers increase in the workforce. So we have partnered with AARP and we continue to engage with other stakeholders to make sure that we're providing education. We see cases coming in where there are Asian New Yorkers and they believe that they have been discriminated against because of their age. And we know that the workforce is aging. Right. And so this is an opportunity for us to really do a lot of engagement and a lot of education. Age is a protected characteristic here in New York. Unlike the federal government, which has I believe it's a threshold of 40 years old before you can actually file an age discrimination, that does not exist here in New York. I think we're talking about 18 or 21. So those protections are in place. Again, I think it speaks to the desire to ensure that New York is progressive and protecting everyone. But we have to continue to get that message out, right? And so whether it's partnerships, whether it's outreach, making sure that that population knows that they can come here. Also in the context of housing, right? I know we're sort of speeding through this, but I want to really highlight our areas of jurisdiction.
Sure.
It's housing, it's employment, it's education, and then public accommodation. And so what does that mean? That means spaces that are open to the public, making sure that there's accessibility. That means, are you being discriminated because you're an older individual seeking an apartment? So again, really a significant part of our outreach efforts this year.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. No other questions? Nothing else. Well, I think I'd love to just end just very briefly with how someone who believes they've been discriminated against can contact.
What's our process?
What's our process? I think that would be really helpful.
So you can file a complaint, file a report.
Right.
There are two different ways, right? You can go online and you have accessibility through online, dhr.newyork.gov, or you can call and you can actually engage with a live individual. I'm very proud that with the investment that the governor made, that we were able to really revamp our intake system, which was a bit confusing in the past, really confusing, if I'm going to be clear. And so you can actually speak with a live agent.
In any in language that you need.
All the language, making sure that we have accessibility, right? Accessibility is key. But you can engage with a live individual, which at this time and age is almost impossible to do in other areas of our life, who will walk you through the process and who will let you know the information that you need. And so that, I think, is a significant achievement for the division. We know that we have a lot of individuals who might believe they've been discriminated and they're not sure. They're not sure the type of information they may need to provide, right? We might need employer information. We might need information regarding a landlord. And so the ability to interact with a live human being to walk them through that process is really significant. We take in that call, and if we believe that we have jurisdiction and we review the facts, then it moves to our complaint process. Once you're in the complaint process, all the legal intricacies happen and you're assigned to an investigator.
Because people, and if I may interject, don't really understand that we're a legal enforcement agency. We're a legal shop, as you often like to say. And so, I think it's a great thing that people feel supported in that legal process, because sometimes lawyers aren't, especially clear in the things that they need to actually.
As two lawyers.
Oh, no, I can probably say it because I'm a lawyer. But I think, again, to your point, the call center is a game changer in that regard because folks can actually talk that through and get the information that is important for us to be able to process their case. So yes, and then going into our complaint processing system is the next step.
Right. So the complaint processing system, matter is investigated. If there is actually probable cause, we are also then able to move the case forward and it'll get adjudicated through our parental leave program. I'm sorry. It'll get adjudicated through our hearings process, right? And so that hearings process is important. I'm proud to say that last year we recovered, nearly $9.5 million on behalf of complainants who filed discrimination claims here. And I think, we think about what that means for the everyday New Yorker who perhaps has experienced discrimination. you're really talking about making sure that their claims are heard and that they feel seen here in New York. We spoke about the call center. I'd be remiss if I don't share the number, 844-NYS-DHR1. That is the line for our call center. And so I encourage people, if they believe they've been discriminated, to please give us a call, file a report, let us sift through the facts.
Yeah.
We'll let you know whether it actually falls within our jurisdiction,
Right.
and we'll be able to move forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this time. I enjoyed chatting with you as always. We always have a great conversation. And I'm going to pass it back to Anne.
Thank you so much. Everyone at Women Creating Change would like to extend our sincere thanks to Commissioner Miranda and Chief of Staff Alonso-Ortiz for this engaging, very informative discussion. We know your time is valuable. We know you're doing important work, so we are especially grateful that you chose to spend part of your day with us. As we conclude today's event, we invite you to stay connected by signing up for the Women Creating Change newsletter and completing our post-event survey. You can find these, there will be links in the chat. You will also see on the screen that there are QR codes, so you can access both the newsletter and the post-event survey this way. Your feedback helps us shape future programming, so we appreciate you taking even just a few moments to share any thoughts that you might have. We also hope you will join us for our next symposium. This is an in-person event. It's called Health Across a Lifetime, Access, Affordability, and Innovation in Women's Health. And it will take place on June 18th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Barnard College. A registration link is available in the chat. And these are really lovely events. As I mentioned, they're in person, and there's something really incredible about the synergy that takes place at in-person events. Thank you to everyone who attended for your time, your attention, your questions, contributions to today's conversation, and we wish you a wonderful Wednesday and look forward to seeing you again very soon.